Ask him what he wants to be when he grows up.
Кем ты хочешь быть, когда ты вырастешь?
Летчиком.
A pilot.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
Кем ты хочешь быть, когда ты вырастешь?
Солдатом.
A soldier. А ты кем?
Танкистом.
A tankman.
A what man?
A tankman.
A tank man. Ah. What do you want to be?
Я хочу быть, монтером.
Монтёром. A technician.
This ruin behind me is part of the 11th century Petrovskaya monastery in Kiev, whose golden domes and golden crosses are one of the sights of Kiev, particularly the great tall belfry tower. This ruin stands just as it was after the Germans blew it up in September 1941. It was the Cathedral of the Assumption, one of the many churches and cathedrals which make up this monastery. And it was built in the year 1073. Most of this monastery now is not used for worship. It's a museum, but some of it is still used as a church.
All this destruction was deliberate. The monastery had no military significance, but the Nazis blew it up with mines, as they did practically the whole center of the city. The new Kiev is capital of the Ukraine, an area about the size of France, and it's Russia's third biggest city with a population of over 1 million people. It's entirely different from Moscow. One of the best writers on modern Russia, John Gunther, in his Inside Russia Today, says that it exudes sophistication, stability, and charm. It's a city of wide streets and of imposing buildings like the State University and the regional headquarters of the Communist Party. The inevitable statue of Lenin. Kiev has a museum entirely devoted to his life history. Russia is a great place for exhibitions. This one, which Robin Day visited, shows the development of the Ukraine since 1913. Coal production's gone up 7 times, steel production nearly 9 times, electrical power 80 times. The production of things to wear and use isn't quite so impressive, but the Russians have been promised that those too will be increased under the current 7-year plan. The Ukraine used to be Russia's biggest grain-growing area. It isn't now. Some of the eastern republics grow more, but it's still largely agricultural, and the tractor is its symbol. The Ukraine's also famous for its music and dancing. The symphonies of Russian composers are full of Ukrainian tunes. Mr. Macmillan saw some of the dancing while he was in Kiev when he visited the State Academy Theatre of Opera and Ballet. The ballet, Song of the Woods. Leningrad, formerly St. Petersburg, city of Peter the Great, once the capital of Imperial Russia. Here the Tsar of all the Russias reviewed his troops, and here in February 1917 the troops refused to fire on rioters in revolt against the costly German war. The Tsar fell, and 8 months later Lenin seized power.
And this is where it all began. This is the birthplace of Soviet Russia. This is the building where the course of world history was changed 42 years ago. The building is called the Smolny Institute, and it was here that Lenin plotted the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, after he had been brought to Leningrad in secret from Switzerland by the Germans to begin a revolution in Russia. And before this building became the headquarters of the revolutionaries in 1917, it was a school for daughters of the aristocracy, young ladies of the nobility. Now, it is the headquarters of the Leningrad Communist Party. And this is communist democracy in practice, because the day I'm in Leningrad, on Sunday, March the 1st, is election day for the deputies of this part of Russia. It's the main part of Russia, 120 million people. It includes the whole area of Moscow and Leningrad, the biggest state in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. And up there it says this is the polling station for today's elections. And here it says that the I must get my interpreter here who will explain it to me because I'm not too good on this. Now, what does that say?
All the power in the USSR belongs to the working people of city and village in the form of the Soviets of the workers' deputies.
Well, now I'm going to ask the man in charge of this election, the chairman of the election commission, to explain one or two things about it which may puzzle people in Britain. What is your job in these elections here?
Какую работу вы выполняете здесь?
Я председатель участковой избирательной комиссии.
He's the chairman of the election commission here.
Can he explain what is the point of voting if the people don't have a choice of parties like we have in England?
Можете ли вы объяснить, какой смысл таких выборов, если у нас только одна партия?
Минуточку. Я сейчас отвечу.
Let him think.
Pardon?
Just a moment.
Это у нас все народные выборы.
We have all people elections. You see?
What do you mean, all people elections?
See, it doesn't depend upon the party.
How do people express disapproval of a candidate? Supposing they don't want a candidate, how do they do that?
Если они не хотят выбрать этого депутата, что они делают в этом случае?
Рабочие сами выдвигают, и рабочие этого кандидата знают, и они его избирают.
You see, the people choose any candidate they like, and then they vote for him.
How many people will not vote?
How many?
People will not vote.
Сколько избирателей не будут, допустим, голосовать за это?
100% будут голосовать избиратели, за исключением, которые уже больные.
You see, 100% of people take
И к ним все равно,
part
они
in
все равно
voting.
принимают участие. К ним приезжают в больницу, голосуют они на месте.
100% of people take part in voting, except for those who are ill and who are now in hospitals.
Do you mean to say there's not a single person who doesn't want to come and vote?
No, this is what he
No,
said.
will you ask him?
Again.
No, ask him, is there nobody who doesn't want to come and vote ever?
Есть ли кто-нибудь, кто не хочет голосовать?
Нет, таких нет.
No, there are no such people.
What would happen if somebody did not want to come and vote?
Что случится, если кто-нибудь не хочет голосовать?
Если кандидат, данный гражданин, который не знает кандидата, он не будет голосовать. Но у нас таких случаев нет.
We have no such cases, because all the people who vote know their candidates. They meet him before the voting.
Thank you very much.
In Moscow and Kiev, few people stopped to stare at our camera team. Things were very different in Leningrad, and Robin Day collected a big, if juvenile, audience.
And we've got a lot of young Russian citizens of the Soviet Union standing by me. I'm going to ask this gentleman here what he wants to be when he grows up. Ask him what he wants to be when he grows up.
Кем ты хочешь быть, когда ты вырастешь?
Летчиком.
A
Летчиком.
pilot.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
Кем ты хочешь быть, когда ты вырастешь?
Солдатом.
A soldier. А ты кем?
Танкистом.
A tankman.
A what man?
A tankman.
A tank man. What does he want to be?
Кем ты хочешь?
Пулеметчиком.
I don't know this one in
Will you
English.
ask him? Ah, what do you want to be?
Я хочу быть, монтером.
A technician.
Leningrad is the second city of Russia with a population of nearly 3 million. It's an industrial town and a big seaport, but it still has some of the elegance of its imperial past. The river Neva's frozen hard in winter, a reminder that it's Russia's gateway to the Arctic. Peter the Great's summer palace doesn't look very summery either. No need for stock exchanges in Russia now. Leningrad's is a naval museum. The city was under siege by the Germans for nearly 3 years in the Second World War, but it never fell, and the destruction wasn't so drastic as in Kiev. Once away from the old imperial city, you might be in Manchester or Glasgow. Robin Day travelled back from Leningrad to Moscow in Russia's crack express, the Red Arrow. The line goes dead straight for 300 miles. Tsar Nicholas I ordered his engineers to build it that way, and so they did. The journey takes just under 9 hours. It's a luxurious ride by any standards, and the trip also gives the traveller a chance to see a little of Russia's great industrial development. Factories, power stations, houses for the workers. Russia's housing standards are low by comparison with ours, and there's a lot of overcrowding. But now the Russians are planning to go in for green belts and satellite towns on the British model, with factories kept severely in their place.
Now a final word from Moscow. In these 2 Russian roving reports, we've shown you some of the people and places we've seen while rushing around after Mr. Macmillan during the last 10 days or so. Of course, even in such a short time, one forms impressions, and here are some of mine. First of all, it's obvious that the Russians concentrate their efficiency and drive on essentials, the Sputnik, for instance, and industrial development. But otherwise, life can be exasperatingly slow and inefficient. In small, everyday matters, the vast government machine grinds exceeding slow, especially for visitors. And the people here? Well, you immediately find how different they are outside Moscow. In Kiev and Leningrad, the atmosphere was much more relaxed and informal than in Moscow. The people were helpful and friendly and often very charming. The standard of living, well, as I said in our first roving report, fair comparisons are very difficult. People I saw here were quite reasonably clothed and fed. The price of some necessities is high, but taxes are low and rents are low, though there is grave overcrowding. And Mr. Khrushchev has spoken of the millions of houses and flats that Russia needs. And Mr. Khrushchev has also spoken about drunkenness. And goodness, the Russians certainly like their drink. I haven't seen any drunks myself in the street, but I don't think it's a coincidence that on my only night out in Russia, at one of Moscow's leading restaurants, the 2 men at the table next to me were blind drunk, swaying about and incapable of speech, and one of them tried to pour his wine into my coffee. Something I noticed about young Russians is that many of them, particularly students, are avid for popular Western music, particularly American jazz. You know, I never thought I would find myself being asked by a pretty Russian girl in Leningrad, quite solemnly, "Mr. Day, would you please tell me the words of the song, 'I Can't Give You Anything But Love, Baby'?" Fortunately, I was able to grant her request. Finally, the communist system itself. All the Russians I spoke to are immensely proud of it. They point to its immense scientific and economic progress. But it's no use talking to them about our form of democracy. If they understand it, they think it is wasteful and inefficient. As like as not, they have never thought about it. It is no use telling them you hate relying on government newspapers like Pravda and Izvestia. It's no use saying that elections with no choice of party are a farce. They have their way and we have ours. Mr. Khrushchev said that our different social systems are no obstacle to peace. We can only hope that he meant what he said.